Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the Real Talk Bible Study. May the Holy Spirit open up our minds and our understandings to understand His words during this lesson. So let's do it.
Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk, and drawn from the breasts. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. For with stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to this people. So, let's begin. Let the Bible speak.
So as I said before, we're going to get into this lesson and just let the Bible speak for itself. And we just learn, pay attention. May the Holy Spirit open our eyes and our understanding for us to understand this lesson. As in Yeshua's great and holy name, hallelujah, amen. Let's continue.
Today's lesson: the relation between Eve and modern feminism. In today's lesson we will be briefly exploring the correlation with Eve's decision to act independently of her husband Adam in Genesis 3, as the beginning of disorder in human relationships, and how that same spirit of independent rebellion against God-ordained roles is reflected in some aspects of modern feminism, especially the ideology behind the independent woman movement. Let's explore this step by step.
For many, feminism is the foundational belief system that drives their every decision. But for others, it has the absolute opposite impact. Any mention invoking deep disdain. The initial women's rights movement was about just that, securing basic rights for women, and it was successful in this endeavor. But since then, feminism has transformed so dramatically that it would be absolutely unrecognizable to the original pioneers. And despite facing intense opposition, feminism keeps pushing on in its eternal search for gender equality. But the radical feminist vision for a fair society is much darker than you could ever imagine, and we're much closer to it than you think. In the beginning, there was the first wave of feminism in the US, with figures like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton who argued for women to have the basic rights to vote and own property. In the 1980s, women had neither such right, didn't have many employment opportunities, and if they did work, they were required to hand over their money to their husbands. In 1920, one of these injustices was corrected when the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution was ratified, giving women the vote. The second wave of feminism started in the 1960s, coinciding with the advent of the birth control pill, which is arguably one of, if not the most significant event in human history. Why? Well, it changed one of the most basic realities of our biological existence, the consequence of sex. For millennia, sex meant there would be a possibility of pregnancy. But now, for the first time, women could suspend their fertility. This meant that women who were, till now, the great gatekeepers of sex due to the risk of pregnancy, could now theoretically have sex like men, at least according to second-wave feminists who were focused on ending cultural inequalities concerning reproductive rights and workplace discrimination and heavily pushed for sexual liberation. And they had many successes. The birth control pill was approved in the 1960s, abortion was legalized across the US in 1973, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed in 1974, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex or marital status in the extension of credit. This made property ownership and financial independence much easier for women. This wave also brought with it the biggest shifts in the cultural behavior for women. Sexual liberation became a reality. During the second wave, many obscenity laws were challenged and the adult industry quickly established itself. While Playboy had already been around since 1953, the first Hustlers magazine was published in 1974, followed by Jugs in 1981. The third wave of feminism, which began in the 1990s, was focused on diverse perspectives, individual empowerment, and the oh-so-dreaded concept, intersectionality. It was during this wave that Judith Butler published the book Gender Trouble, asserting that gender was a social construct. The self-esteem movement, or the idea of follow your bliss, became more prevalent in this time, and the embracing of intersectionality meant there was a new lens in which to examine the oppression and privilege a person experienced based on their sex, sexuality, race, religion, and economic status. Meaning, a black queer woman would be considered far more oppressed than a white queer woman or a black straight man. During this wave, women continued to see greater improvement in their economic freedom and employment opportunities, a further breakdown in gendered roles, and an increase in sexual freedom. Currently, we are in the fourth wave of feminism, which has taken the ideas of gender fluidity, self-esteem, and intersectionality and achieved critical mass with the help of social media. With the implementation of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies across companies, these ideas have made their way into human resource policies and corporate culture, as well as the writing rooms of major Hollywood production companies. Since the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, which was the first women's rights convention 176 years ago, a lot has changed for women in the US. Women have successfully joined the workforce, and many limitations of gender roles have been challenged. Female CEOs run more than 10% of the Fortune 500 companies. There are 337 female billionaires as of 2023, and women are outpacing men in the US educational system. Contraception is widespread, even though the battle for abortion varies state by state, and women are now out-earning or making the same as their husbands in nearly half of marriages, according to a Pew Research in 2023. Regarding the US government, currently there are 25 out of 100 senators and 126 out of 435 House of Representatives that are female, as is our vice president.
We did it, Joe.
And it's a similar situation in most other countries where every year more and more women are elected into positions of power and governance. So are we done then? Has feminism won? Has the patriarchy been vanquished? Can the feminist activists disband and go back to their day jobs? Well, the fourth wave of feminism would say, hell no. According to them, the patriarchy and female plight is worse than ever. Women continue to experience sexism, as the Me Too movement brought to light through several cases of women being sexually harassed in Hollywood. In addition to sexism, women take on disproportionate amount of childcare responsibilities and household labor, in addition to having a job. And if women are unmarried, they face a lot of pressure to settle down and have children or freeze their eggs, all of which is contributing to poor mental health for women. It's for this reason that many feminists encourage women to stay single, saying, quote, "There are so many unspoken science-backed benefits of single life. More time for yourself and your friends, an increased likelihood to be fitter and healthier, great career prospects and opportunities, and potentially more financial security, if you choose not to have children." And it is somewhat understandable why they are pushing for singlehood, since currently in the US, over half of marriages end in divorce. This is for first-time marriages, by the way. For second and third marriages, the divorce rates are even higher. And while divorce rates have decreased over the last 50 years, so have marriage rates. The real loss in a situation of a divorce, of course, is felt by the children and the mother, since 80% of single-parent households are headed up by moms. Women, it seems, end up bearing the day-to-day impact of child-rearing, sexism, as well as disproportionate pressures from society. So feminists would argue that we are far from equality. Well, the feminist Shulamith Firestone has a suggestion, as she laid out in her book, published in 1970, The Dialectic of Sex. Firestone believed that true equality could only be achieved when the following conditions could be created in society through the intervention of science. 1. Social gender norms are removed. 2. Men and women are made to look physically indistinguishable. 3. The nuclear family is eradicated. 4. Babies are not carried by women, but rather grown in little pods, thus freeing women from the burdens of motherhood. She also believed that children should not be raised by their biological parents, but rather by groups of unrelated adults. It all sounds outlandish until you realize that we are headed in a frighteningly similar direction. The trans movement is insisting that sex and gender are social constructs, and adults and children should be able to rely on medical intervention to jump between check boxes, while others argue that non-binary and gender fluidity, along with a whole host of other pronouns, is the way to go. Parental rights are constantly being challenged, and there is a push for identity-oriented community influence over children rather than influence of parents or elders. And the nuclear family is in tatters.
The impact on relationships and the family and the ripple effects of this mindset can be seen in some of the following ways. Broken relationships. Many men feel unwanted, unneeded, or disrespected, especially when their leadership or protection is seen as oppressive rather than loving, and women may feel unsupported or isolated, shouldering burdens they were never meant to carry alone. Fatherless homes. Rising numbers of children are growing up without active fathers, which data shows is linked to higher rates of poverty, crime, and mental health struggles. And lower academic achievement and life stability. Marital breakdown. When both partners are told to prioritize self-fulfillment over sacrifice, relationships become fragile, and marriage becomes a contract, not a covenant, making it more easy to exit when inconvenient.
Feminism has convinced women everywhere that their role at the office is far more important than their role as a mother. Many women, encouraged by examples like Samantha Jones, are choosing to stay single, stay childless, and as Samantha would say, fabulous. And trans woman Dylan Mulvaney is eagerly awaiting for signs to make it possible for Dylan to be impregnated by a woman.
Never say never.
We are closer than ever to Firestone's vision for society, and yet we aren't much closer to a utopia. In fact, society seems to be falling apart. There are economic issues like the shrinking middle class and housing crisis, but there are also major cultural issues like massive infighting and polarization. Crime is on the rise, drug abuse and homelessness are rampant across the country, and we constantly seem to be on the brink of a civil war. So if the nuclear family is to be blamed for society's ills, as many radical feminists would claim, why is it that we are at our most destabilized culturally today when the nuclear family is at its weakest? In 1950, 1 in 16 children in America grew up in a house without a father. According to the 2022 US Census, that number is now 1 in 4. And it turns out this is not just something that impacts the mothers left to raise children alone. Children without fathers in the home are 279% more likely to carry guns and deal drugs. And a study of juvenile delinquents found that 86% experience fatherlessness. Daughters from fatherless homes are 900% more vulnerable to sexual abuse and are 7 times more likely to become pregnant before the age of 17. 75% of rapists are motivated by displaced anger that is associated with feelings of abandonment that involves their father. And 75% of adolescent patients being treated in substance abuse centers are from fatherless homes. 90% of the youth in the US who decided to run away from home or become homeless originally come from a fatherless home. The displacement of the stable family environment has had devastating impact on the individual and in the process, our society. Seeing this data, we can understand why issues like homelessness, crime, drug abuse, and mental illness have become so rampant in America. You need only to look on any major city streets and you see the absolute devastation of drug usage on young individuals. And the problem of fatherlessness is particularly impacting the African American communities, where 48% of the homes are fatherless. Hispanic households have a 26% fatherless rate, while Caucasian white households have an 18% fatherless rate. Asian households incidentally have the lowest fatherless rate of 15%. Firestone's assertion that it would be greatly beneficial that children should be raised away from their biological parents is categorically false. Turns out, after countless research done on this matter, children raised by both their parents, even of the same gender, have a far greater likelihood to be well-adjusted and mentally healthy compared to those raised by single parents, something Melissa Kearney discusses in great detail in her book, Two-Parent Privilege. In face of this crisis and the increased burden on women to raise children alone, the government has stepped in and supplemented the father through welfare and child support laws, but nothing can adequately make up for the absence of a father. So, what caused this catastrophic shift in family dynamics? Was it feminism? Well, believe it or not, it was the advent of birth control and the legalization of abortion. Before the 1960s, in America, if a man got a woman pregnant, it was societally expected of him to marry her, often referred to as a shotgun wedding. But once women were given the choice to terminate the pregnancy, it also gave men the choice to abandon their responsibility. This is a common argument you hear today where people cite the multiple forms of contraception that are available to women, wondering why then a man should be forced to be financially and emotionally responsible for children that he had no choices in conceiving. So which side is correct here? Is it the feminists that have consistently brought more and more options for reproductive rights to women, as well as transformed the divorce court systems into legislating heavily in favor of mothers as far as alimony, child support, and visitation rights? Or is it the red pill movement that proclaims that men have no rights or choices, and as such are entitled to abandon women and children at their own discretion? Turns out they're both wrong, but both sides are reacting to each other. The initial women's rights movement was a response to a male-dominated society that insisted that women should exist as silent support acts for their men. But as they gained more and more successes and actually achieved equal status for women, they chose to keep going, and the underlying motivation evolved from righting a wrong to exacting revenge. The narrative shifted from equality for women to down with men, and men became the focal point of all the hatred. The feminist movement sought to convince the world that every single ill in society was because of men, and that by simply existing, men led privileged, easy lives. They became the ultimate villains, not a group of people to reconcile with, but an oppressive class that needed to be vanquished, or at the very least, dominated. This understanding of men could not be further from the truth. Historically, some men have enjoyed the privileges of being at the top of the hierarchy, in the form of money, power, and influence. But the privilege a king or president has enjoyed is far different from a serf or a garbage man. But to claim that because most leaders throughout history have been men means all men have enjoyed all boons of society is as misguided as assuming that all women women are inherently good. In fact, it's men who have always been considered the disposable group, always placed on the front lines of the most uncomfortable aspects of society. Whether it's down in the trenches of warfare or up on the power lines, it's their willingness to put their lives on the line that have kept the gates guarded, the streets safe, and the power running. It's even the men that make sure that garbage is promptly hauled away. But the feminists refuse to acknowledge any of that. They refuse to acknowledge that it's the patriarchy that keeps the lights on. And it's the spread of this intense disdain that has poisoned the relationships between men and women. Why should men step up to their responsibilities to women and children if all they will receive is scorn and derision for simply existing? But feminists didn't stop there. In fact, they have been just as successful at causing harm to children and women too. In their relentless push for female freedom, feminists have successfully destroyed a fundamental belief system among their followers: the sanctity of life. Wherever you land on the issue of abortion, it's hard to deny that radical feminists almost relish in the carnage that the act requires and inviting the opportunity to undergo such a procedure to make their point. It's one thing if you recognize the societal need for it, but respect the gravity of such a notion and seek to avoid it as much as possible versus celebrating its occurrence.
Modern feminism and the independent woman movement. While early feminism fought for just and necessary rights, like voting, education, and protection, modern radical feminism often pushes ideologies that are contrary to biblical order, such as rejection of male leadership in the home or church, promotion of self-sufficiency and independence from men, redefining womanhood based on power, autonomy, and often, sexual liberation, devaluing marriage, motherhood, and submission, viewed as oppression rather than strength. This independent woman ideal often proclaims, "I don't need a man. I make my own rules. I submit to no one." While personal strength and resilience are admirable, when radical autonomy becomes the goal, it undermines the mutual dependence that marriage and family require.
We have never had more singles in America than right now. Marriage is on the decline, the birth rate is at a record low, and nobody really seems to be connecting anymore, yet we have all this technology to connect. I feel like it's a problem with the culture. Our culture really needs a lobotomy. We don't have the values that we used to have, and it's conservative values that have been replaced with liberal values that I feel like are at the core of this disconnect between men and women, and the reason why men and women don't value family and marriage anymore. And I see a lot of men actually in a movement today that don't even see what the value of a woman in it is anymore, and that's really scary. They feel like if a woman acts just like a man, wants to compete with me like a man, but doesn't provide any feminine value or benefits, or isn't helpful at all, then what's really the point of a woman or a wife anymore? And I think it's a really scary state in society where we don't even know the importance of family and a marriage. Because when we have strong relationships between men and women, and we have a strong family, we have a strong country. The feminism of today has devolved into toxic feminism. Feminists always say that there's toxic masculinity. I don't believe that. I believe that there's toxic feminism, and it's destroying relationships and it's destroying the country. It's become a way for them to just cast all the blame on men for all their problems and to try to tear down this invisible patriarchy so that they can have power and subordination over men. This is actually more of a war on women than it is for men. And what feminists don't realize is that they've been lied to and told that they would be just as happy and fulfilled having a fulfilling career and making a lot of money without a man rather than having a family and love with a man. And unfortunately that's a lie, and we're seeing that today with a lot of women that are very unhappy and miserable until their 40s and 50s. They're making a lot of money, but they're lonely inside and they're empty because they don't have that fulfillment of love and a family. Ultimately, feminism has made it much harder for women to have what they want most in life, which is a family, which is love ultimately. And men are actually freed up to do whatever they want to in life and not have to be attached to a woman or be obligated to marriage. So in the end, feminism is actually hurting women more than men, and this is why I ultimately think feminism needs to go. I think dating apps and Tinder are definitely part of this problem, because they create this generation of the grass is greener syndrome, what I call. And it's made people disposable and replaceable. And you might just think, oh, I met some fantastic woman, she's perfect. But then the next night you think, maybe I can meet someone with just a better butt or just better boobs and she could be a little bit more perfect. So we're never satisfied anymore. We're always looking for the bigger, better deal. And the dating apps and Tinder has only exacerbated that. And I think we should actually do away with them. So I get asked this all the time, and as someone who has been a dating and relationship coach, working with both men and women to get them in relationships, I could tell you this. We can fight human nature all we want to, but at the end of the day, we can't fool human nature. And men do like to be the hunter. It's in their natural instinct to be the hunter. They like to pursue women and at least appreciate her when they get her. And I found that when a woman pursues a man and is more of the aggressor, yes, it might work for the short term. Yes, it might work for some people, but for the most part, a guy tends to not appreciate her in the end, and the relationship falls apart because there's an imbalance of power there. There is something called sexual polarity that's really important, and people today seem to forget it. But that is that a masculine man needs to attract a feminine woman. Feminine energy needs to attract masculine energy. And it is more of the masculine energy to be more of the aggressor. And that's why I don't think that switching gender roles will ever really work and will ever create satisfying relationships. Ooh, gender equality makes us happier. I think that gender equality does not actually make us happier in the long run because we are already equal inherently. We're inherently equal. But we have differences, and there are wonderful differences between men and women. And I actually believe that when we appreciate each other's differences more and what we each bring to the table, and we value that, things that women can bring that men certainly cannot do well, or things that men can bring to the table that women can't really do well. When we actually acknowledge those differences and place a high value on them, I believe that we actually have more respect towards each other, and we feel more appreciated as a person too when we're more fulfilled. We feel like we're serving a purpose here, the opposite sex really appreciates us, and it's something that they can't do on their own, and it works perfectly. We're supposed to be teammates, we're not supposed to be competitive.
In Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 to 17, Adam is created first and given the command directly from the Most High, not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And verse 18 states, "And the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone, I will make him an helpmeet for him." Thus Eve was created as a wife and a helper suitable for Adam. But in Genesis chapter 3, Eve listens to the serpent, makes the decision independently, and eats the fruit. Then she gives it to Adam, who follows her lead instead of obeying God. The results. The original order was inverted. The serpent leads the woman. The woman leads the man. The man disobeys God. This is not just a personal mistake, it introduces rebellion, disorder, and brokenness into relationships, families, and all of creation. In verse 16 it says this, "Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." This implies an ongoing power struggle between the sexes, a distortion of God's intended harmony. This reversal of roles introduced disorder into the relationship between man and woman. The book of Isaiah chapter 3, verse 12, reflects this same disorder as a sign of judgment, saying, "Women rule over them, not as empowerment, but as a consequence of men abandoning leadership and women stepping into roles out of alignment with God's design." This parallels the effects of modern feminism and the rise of the so-called independent woman movement, which often encourages women to reject male leadership and traditional family roles, promoting women in leadership instead. The result has been widespread relational breakdown, fatherless homes, and confusion in gender roles, echoing the same pattern of disorder and destruction that began in the garden, starting with Eve. In the book of 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14, states, "And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression." Meaning, Eve was deceived and was the one who fell into transgression, which many traditional interpretations use to explain why men are called to lead in spiritual and authoritative roles. Modern feminism, which advocates for equal leadership between men and women, challenges this idea by rejecting the notion that gender should determine authority or susceptibility. From a biblical standpoint, Eve's deception is seen as a cautionary foundation for male leadership, whereas feminism views such reasoning as outdated and unjust. This creates tension between the biblical model of gender roles rooted in creation and fall, and feminism's push to erase those distinctions. The correlation between Eve's independence and modern feminist rebellion can be clearly seen in the table below. In the book of Genesis chapter 3, Eve listens to a voice other than the Most High's order, which parallels modern feminist views listening to ideologies that reject biblical gender roles. Eve acts apart from Adam's leadership, and modern feminism also encourages autonomy from male leadership. Eve took the lead in decision-making, similar to modern feminism, which promotes female dominance or independence in relationships. And finally, Eve's decision broke relational unity with Adam and the Most High. Similarly, modern feminism leads to relational instability and broken homes. Her rebellion was subtle, clothed in the desire for wisdom, but resulted in the breakdown of divine order. Eve's choice to step outside God's order introduced relational dysfunction, and modern feminist ideals that promote independence from men often continue that disorder. When society replaces God's design with self-centered autonomy, relationships break down. Restoration comes not through blame, but through returning to God's blueprint for manhood, womanhood, and family, rooted in humility, love, and divine purpose. This can also be seen in the book of 1 Kings chapters 16 to 21 and the book of Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, in the life and spirit of Jezebel, the wife of King Ahab, who is known for her controlling and manipulative spirit. She dominated her husband, promoted idolatry through Baal worship, and used seduction, intimidation, and murder, notably having Naboth killed to seize his vineyard to gain power. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, Yeshua refers to her symbolically as a spirit of rebellion that leads the Most High's people into sexual immorality and idolatry. Jezebel's rebellion was bold, aggressive, and destructive, and a clear usurpation of godly authority, making her a lasting symbol of spiritual corruption and destruction. While Eve and Jezebel are very different in tone, Eve acted out of deception, Jezebel out of defiance. They both symbolize a rejection of God's order. Their spirits are echoed today in the modern ideologies and behaviors of feminism and undermines biblical authority, destroy families, and foster confusion in the gender roles. This is why many see Jezebel not just as a person, but as a spiritual archetype of rebellion and modern feminism, one that began with Eve's choice and is still active in the world today, especially in areas where God's design for relationships and authority is rejected. According to the book of Ephesians chapter 5, the role of a good wife and woman is beautifully defined by godly character, honor, support, industrious, and faithful. She walks in wisdom and strength, honors her husband, builds her home, and lives in reverence to the Most High, reflecting the beauty and purpose God designed for womanhood and marriage. She respects and submits to her husband as unto the Lord, reflecting the church's relationship to Christ, and supports his leadership in the home with humility and love, while her husband is called to love her sacrificially. The book of Proverbs chapter 31 describes a virtuous woman is hardworking, wise, trustworthy, and generous. She cares for her household, strengthens her husband's reputation, and fears the Lord, which is her true beauty. And in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 4, it says, "A virtuous wife is a crown to her husband, she honors and uplifts him." In contrast, a shameful wife harms his integrity and undermines the household.
So let's start to wind this down now, brothers and sisters. Let's see what we should have hopefully learned through the Spirit during this lesson, Most High willing. The final conclusion on the matter.
Final conclusion. Eve's sin in Genesis 3, where she rejected God's command and sought independence, parallels the spirit of modern feminism, which often challenges the Most High's design for gender roles and authority. In the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9, it reminds us that, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun," suggesting that the same pattern of rebellion and desire to redefine boundaries continues throughout history. Just as Eve's actions led to disorder and consequences, so too does modern feminism reject the Most High's order, thus contributing to the societal confusion and breakdown. Shalom.
Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep His commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not grievous. And hereby we do know that we know Him, if we keep His commandments. He that saith, I know Him, and keepeth not His commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoso keepeth His word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. Hereby know we that we are in Him. Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that do His commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city.
Like a family reunion, we were all singing the same song, giving praises to the Almighty One. All I could feel was happiness, surrounded by righteousness. I saw Zion in a vision. Jah was there amidst everyone, stretching forth His right hand. Oh, it's like a family reunion. Zion in a vision. Jah was there amidst everyone, stretching forth His right hand. Oh, it's like a family reunion. There's no room for the ungodly, none for the workers of iniquity, only pure in hearts and clean hands. So be good, oh little ones. I saw Zion in a vision. Jah was there amidst everyone, stretching forth His right hand. Oh, it's like a family reunion. Zion in a vision. Jah was there amidst everyone, stretching forth His right hand. Oh, it's like a family reunion. Everything seems so real, the warmness of Jah I could feel. His love filled me up. Oh Lord, I didn't want to wake up. I saw Zion in a vision. Jah was there amidst everyone, stretching forth His right hand. Oh, it's like a family reunion. Yeah, I saw Zion in a vision. Hey, yeah, hey. We were all singing the same song, giving praises to the Almighty One. All I could feel was happiness, surrounded by righteousness. Zion in a vision. I mean it. vision. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw Zion in a vision. Jah was there amidst everyone, stretching forth his right hand. Oh, it's like a family reunion. Family reunion. I saw Zion in a vision. Jah was there. I wanna share something with you. Something with you. Oh God. Oh God. Share something with you. Music is the rod and we are Moses, hey, leading God's children to the promised land. Music is the voice of his brother Aaron, yes, preaching and comforting of the Father's command. We have the power to turn things around. It's for us to stand up when we fall to the ground. I say this with a smile, pause for a while, Lord. Listen, my son, the prophets shall come. Music is the rod and we are Moses, hey, leading God's children to the promised land. Music is the voice of his brother Aaron, yes, preaching and comforting of the Father's command. No use in trying to compromise the truth. Our eyes are open, we're taking our youths to the land of our father, Mama Africa. Prepare yourselves, tell it to your neighbor. Music is the rod and we are Moses, leading God's children to the promised land. Music is the voice of his brother Aaron, yes, preaching and comforting of the Father's command. Striking the rock, making true love flow. Oh, 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 that flowing love is what we need to go. Well, with this, things can only be better. Setting the foundation for the future. Music is a rod, and we are Moses, leading God's children to the promised land. Music is the voice of his brother Aaron, yes, preaching and comforting of the Father's command. Music is the rod and we are Moses, leading God's children to the promised land. Music is the voice of his brother Aaron, yes, preaching and comforting of the Father's